Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First, I'd like to thank everyone, Sheikh Kifah and Sheikh Ja'far, and everyone who are behind organizing this event, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you and accept from you. I love the title, by the way, من الظلمات إلى النور, from darkness into light. The dhulumat in Arabic is not only one darkness, it's types of darkness, into nur. And let me, before we talk about this point, ask you a question. Because sometimes we take things for granted. Imagine if someone told you I had a big box made of iron and this box was talking to me. Would you believe him? Imagine if he said, I had a big piece of iron and I saw some people sitting on it. And not only that, it can take them from a place to place, even from a country to another country. Would you believe him? You may think of this as something surprising. It's hard to believe, but we see it every day. You watch the TV, you go from a country to country by traveling by plane, right? But the problem here is, because we are used to these things, we do not see them miraculous anymore. Same thing happens when we read the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. The seerah and the events and the change brought by the Prophet ﷺ in itself is miraculous. But because we are used to it, we are familiarized with the story, we don't see it miraculous anymore. So this is the first point I want to address. What did the Prophet ﷺ do? And what does that mean? And how did he bring in that change? I'd like to quote Booker Washington, very famous reformer in America. He said, to measure the size of the accomplishment of anyone, you have to examine the obstacles he had to overcome to reach his goals. Based on how many obstacles you passed or you overcame, this tells me how successful you are. So let's see how the Prophet ﷺ, what the Prophet ﷺ saw first, and in this way you will recognize that success. Geographically speaking, the Prophet ﷺ lived in a desert. What is the concern for the people living in a desert? To get their water, to get some milk, to get some food, that is it. This is their aspiration. Can you imagine that a civilization can come out of a desert? So the place itself does not suggest, geographically, the place itself does not suggest that a civilization will be born out of it. That is why the Roman Empire never thought of attacking the Arabian Peninsula. Why? Why would you be interested in attacking or occupying a desert? No one is interested. So this is the first problem in the face of any reformer. It is just a desert. No one would expect a civilization to come out of it. Second, religiously, you have a lot of problems. You have some people worshiping the idols, and some people denying the day of judgment. How are you going to change that? If you came to me complaining about a smoking problem, you have to go through a lot of programs, and you know it is harmful, and you know that eventually it could cause cancer, and still people suffer through these programs to change this bad habit. Now, I am not talking about bad habits that you are convinced that they are bad. I am talking about religious beliefs that you think are right. How are you going to change this? This is, as Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu said, because we did not see Jahiliyyah, you are not appreciating Islam. If you live that Jahiliyyah or be able to recognize it, you will recognize the Islam, the change Islam brought. So religiously it was hard. Socially, those people and many tribes used to be famous for burying their female infants alive. How are you going to change this? They were engaged in oppressing the orphans and women, giving them no rights, thinking that money is to be given only to the people who can participate in wars. Because the children and women do not, So they don't have a right in inheritance. They do not have a right of, their social rights is basically missed. Also, social structure was completely corrupt. The way they got married was completely corrupt. Many ways of having a relationship with a woman. They used to have what is called istibda' or wife landing. Someone wants to have good offspring. He would send his wife to a man who's stronger, and then she would get pregnant. And this is a way of having kids. One way is just temporary marriage that Islam later abolished. One way is just secret relations, al-akhdan. One way is exchanging sisters with no dowry, with no mahr. So I give you my sister, you give me your sister, and there is no need for any mahr. These are the kinds of, there is also sifah, adultery and fornication. How are you going to change this? Drinking alcohol, they used to have alcohol like water. One of the poets later would say, إذا مت فادفنوني إلى جنب كرمة تروي عظامي بعد موتي عروقها. When I pass away, make sure that you bury my body next to a karm tree from which we get the wine, so that my bones would be watered by this leaves and roots that were touched and watered by wine. So this is how much they were obsessed and addicted to drinking. How are you going to change that? Of course, gambling too. Politically speaking, they were disunited, fighting for trivial, insignificant reasons. And we know all of these stories, there is no need to list them. Wars for 30 years because someone attacked a goat or she-camel that belonged to another tribe. So how are you going to change that? Psychologically, they were into the problem of following their forefathers blindly. وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمُ اتَّبِعُوا مَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ قَالُوا بَلْ نَتَّبِعُ مَا وَجَدْنَا عَلَيْهِ آبَاءَنَا. If it is said to them, follow what Allah has revealed to you, they would say, no, we'll follow what our forefathers used to do. And so what kind of reformers we need to change those people? You need theologians, religious people who can solve the religious problems. You need socialists who can solve the social problems. You need economists to change the economic problem. You need politicians to change the political problems. You need psychiatrists to deal with these issues. And if you're ready with all of these things, you need to deal with two more problems. They used to be very courageous and used to be very generous. How could this be a problem in the face of any reformers? Well, because if they really believe that they are, what they believe is true, then they can sacrifice their life and their money for their batil, for their false beliefs. And this explains why they were engaged in many battles. They didn't give up easily. They used all of their money to stop the Prophet ﷺ. So it was really a big, hard thing to deal with. Now, who made all of that change? Who changed all of these things? It's only the Prophet ﷺ. And it is even more surprising when we know that no one could imagine that the Prophet would bring in that change. Because up to the age of 40, the Prophet ﷺ was never seen as a religious speaker, was never seen as a social reformer. He was not even known as a poet that everyone was good at. So basically, how did he ﷺ all of a sudden, at the age of 40, he's now engaged in discussions with the idol worshippers, with the Jews, with the Christians, bringing in social and economic reform, all of these things, all of a sudden. No one expected that. Yes, he was a Sadiq al-Amin, he had great moral character, but in terms of qualifications for making that change, no one would even imagine that. That is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said it clearly in that way at the end of Surah Ash-Shura. مَا كُنْتَ تَدْرِي مَا الْكِتَابُ وَلَا الْإِيمَانُ وَلَكِنْ جَعَلْنَاهُ نُورًا نَهْدِي بِهِ مَنْ نَشَاءُ مِنْ عِبَادِنَا. Before you didn't know what the book is, what Iman is, but we made this a light through which we guide whomever we wishes. Of course, we understand this based on the attributes of Allah. He is the all-knowing, the all-just, the all-wise. So this raises a big question again. How practically was this change done? How did the Prophet ﷺ change all of that? And this is a big question that deserves a lot of research, because unfortunately we live some problems that the Prophet ﷺ also had to deal with. So we need to learn the methodology that the Quran used. The Quran is a great experience in changing people's beliefs. That is a big topic to deal with. So now, how did the Prophet ﷺ bring in that change? First, you can look at the message itself. The message itself has some criteria that help to bring in that change. And we can adopt that kind of message if we really want to change our communities. Because the seerah is that great story that applies everywhere. Second, we can look at the Prophet ﷺ himself. And third, we can look at the way he ﷺ solved things. So first, his risala, the message itself. We have our kids born here. And I want to make this relative to what we were facing. Our kids are born here, right? And they face a lot of problems, a lot of challenges. And the way we present Islam to them is by giving them a list of halal and haram. And this is a big mistake. Because that was never the way the message of the Prophet ﷺ was delivered. The Prophet ﷺ, as we all know roughly, he spent 13 years in Mecca and 10 years in Medina, right? How was the message, how did the content of the message change people? First, the Prophet's focus in Mecca was about transforming the mind. Transforming the mind in Mecca. In Medina, it was about halal and haram. In Mecca, it was never about halal and haram. In Mecca, it was more about your worldview, who Allah is, worshipping Allah, recognizing Allah, the love of Allah, the fear of Allah, hoping for meeting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It was for the Day of Judgment, establishing a relationship in the Day of Judgment, what would happen there. It was about life itself, what is the purpose of life. It was about man, who are you, who is your creator, and this would result in humility, fighting arrogance in our hearts. It was about sinning and the problem of sinning and how bad it is to be away from Allah, and this leads to repentance. These were the items used in Mecca. Your relationship with Allah. And then in Medina, this is halal and this is haram. In Medina, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, do this, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, do not do this. But the problem we start with our kids, do this, do not do this. Do this, do not do this. We should start first with this message. First, establish a relationship with Allah. That is why this is not revolutionary thought or reform. This is what Sayyida Aisha radiallahu anha said. She said it very clearly. She said, تعلمنا الإيمان قبل القرآن. تقصد بالقرآن هنا يعني التشريع. تعلمنا الإيمان قبل القرآن. فلو كان أول ما نزل لا تسرقوا لا تزنوا ما سمع أحد. She said, we learned faith before the Quran, meaning before the laws. And she said, if the first thing to be revealed was do not commit adultery, do not steal, no one would have listened. Sometimes we keep teaching our kids, you need to fast the whole month of Ramadan. You need to pay zakat. You need to stay away from the haram. 1, 2, 3, 4. And when they hit the age of 15 or 20, they start to rebel. Why? Because the foundation is missing. Did you know that fasting was made mandatory in Medina? Zakah was made mandatory in Medina. It was not in Mecca. All the laws of marriage and divorce, basic halal and haram was in Medina. I am not saying we should not teach them about haram and halal. That is mandatory. This is important. But what I am saying is make sure that you give them the foundations. Make sure that they are qualified to listen to Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu. Otherwise, it may not be effective. So this is one of the big reasons why the message of the Prophet ﷺ was very successful. Because it started in the right way. In America, decades ago, they tried to stop alcohol, and it didn't work because people are not qualified for this. But this alcohol that people in early Islam used to drink, was made haram by just one ayah, one command. It is haram, and that is it. All of the streets of Medina are wet because of wine. Why? It didn't come all of a sudden. It has that preparation. So this is beyond the secret for the success of this great message. The message itself. You start with the foundations, and then you start with halal and haram. Preparing your community. Second, the messenger himself. And I think Sheikh Ja'far alluded to some of the characteristics of the Prophet ﷺ, and Sheikh Kifah will talk more about this. But just one thing I want to give here is the passion the Prophet ﷺ had. That is beyond the success of his message. The passion. Sometimes we see people doing something haram and we scream at them, we get angry at them. But what was the Prophet's reaction? Read the Quran. A lot of ayat talking about how sad the Prophet ﷺ was. فَلَعَلَّكَ بَاخِعٌ نَفْسَكَ عَلَى آثَارِهِمْ إِن لَمْ يُؤْمِنُوا بِهَذَا الْحَدِيثِ أَسَفًا. باخع نفسك أسفا يعني تكاد تقتل نفسك من الحزن. Why are you almost like killing yourself out of sorrow because of this? Because they are rejecting your message. So the Prophet ﷺ used to feel very sad. And as Sheikh Ja'far said, whenever anyone insists on his kufr or dies as a kafir, he would say, نَفْسٌ تَفَلَّتَتْ مِنِّي إِلَى النَّارِ. This is a soul that is not saved. And he would say, my example, an example of everyone else, is like someone setting fire, and the flies are coming to this fire, and I'm trying to keep the flies away. So some people are trying to jump into nar, and I'm trying to keep you away. This is how he felt, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is the message of, not only the message of the shaykh, this is the message of the father. You should have that passion. When your kids is doing something wrong, you should show him that you care. It's not about authority, it's not about control. When your kids sees that and feels that you care, that makes a huge difference. Sometimes the change, we may not see the change. The Prophet ﷺ saw the change. And this is kind of unique in the story of the prophets. He saw the change that he was supposed to bring, ﷺ. But for us, even if our kids do not change right now, our teaching may click in later. And we shouldn't care about when it would happen. What we care about is that a change should be done. Sometimes we raise our kids for selfish reasons. Sometimes a lady would not do salah and we take it easy. She takes off the hijab and this is a disaster. Why? Because you don't care about the deen, believe me. You care about how people see it. Because if you care about the deen, you would be saddened also more about salah, that she's missing salah. I'm not saying hijab is not important. What I am saying is sometimes we teach for selfish reasons. We want our kids to be good so that people would say we're good. No, we want our kids to be good because we want Allah to be pleased with us. And if this is your direction, you would not care that much if that change happened in your life or after your life. You understand this point? So my point is here, be sincere. This helps us not to give up, to keep trying with our kids. Also, the way the Prophet ﷺ brought in that change is once he went to Medina, he established two things. The sense of brotherhood, and it was in the beginning literal brotherhood. I mean, they can inherit from each other. And the masjid. The masjid was the center where people can come and learn their deen. And I think this goes beyond the scope of our discussion. So I'll move to the last point to give more time for Sheikh Kifah. The last point that reveals the secret for that success is focusing on the needs of man. If we really need people to be attracted to the faith, to the deen, you have to prove to them that religion is for man. So defending people's rights is a religious activity. What is zakah? What is zakah? Zakah is a pillar of Islam that deals with fighting poverty. This is another way of putting it. If people feel that religion is for their service, not a burden, they will be attracted to it. And this is what religion is all about. And subhanAllah, in our deen, I was invited one to talk about advocacy in Islam, fighting poverty and injustice. And I had Christian and Muslim and Jewish audience. I reached the point about giving, and I said, in Islam, sometimes, in many cases, charity is mandatory, and this is in the case of zakah. And they said, wow, mandatory? This is, yes, the first time in the history of religion that charity is mandatory. Charity is mandatory through the zakah if you meet the conditions and you are eligible to give. And it is highly recommended even beyond zakah, the regular sadaqat. But my point is, we need to show people that religion is also in their, is for their own benefit, to alleviate people's life and difficulties. And I can, sometimes the books of Seerah do not focus on these different aspects, and they do not give us a complete image of the Prophet ﷺ, because it just deals with Muslims in Mecca feeling oppressed, and in Medina trying to defend their own existence, and that is why they got into some battles with the mushrikeen, and politically they were successful. But this is not how the change was done. This is one part of it. This is just one part of it. Can you, the Seerah does not see us as a social reformer. Was the Prophet I'm not trying to, yes, the Prophet ﷺ is a prophet. This is the right title. But some of the incidents in the books of Seerah can be categorized in the area of social reform. And this is in Sahih Muslim, and maybe everyone here is aware of this incident. The Prophet ﷺ, and it was at Dhuhr time, sitting with the Sahaba. And then he saw some people from the tribe of Mudar coming to him ﷺ. And he looked at them, and their clothes was almost torn out. So all signs of poverty was shown on them. The hadith, the Sahaba said, the Prophet looked sad. So is this our reaction when we see people suffering socially? Or we only care about the religious, the salah? But this is part of the deen too. So the Prophet ﷺ looked sad. And it even seems like he looked nervous. He got into his room. He left the room. He asked Bilal to make adhan. People gathered. They prayed dhuhr. He addressed them. And he said, some people donated money for the sake of Allah. Some people, and he's encouraging everyone, some people are supposed to donate dates, clothes, whatever. And then the Prophet ﷺ got 2 piles of food and clothes in front of him. And the Sahabi said, فَكَانَ وَجْهُهُ مُذْهَبًا. His face looked like illuminating, like happy, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. In the beginning of the hadith, he looked sad. Why? It's not because of missing salah. It is because he's seeing signs of poverty on the faces of his people. This is not supposed to be the case of the Muslims. So this is part of the social reform that the Prophet ﷺ brought in. The idea of ra'fa and being, addressing the mistakes with mercy. We know this, the Sahabi, we would say, the young man who came to the Prophet ﷺ complaining that he's almost addicted to adultery, wal-'iyadhu billah. And he's asking the Prophet, not for a dua, he's asking the Prophet to make it halal for him. He seems to have pressure on him. And the Prophet ﷺ was, what do you expect? If someone came to a sheikh and said, I am suffering from this, is there a chance that this would be halal? What would the sheikh say? The Prophet ﷺ felt for this man and said, do you like this to be done to your mom? No. To your sister? No. To your aunt? No. And the Prophet ﷺ kept listing these relatives. And he said, so people do not like it in the same way. And the Prophet ﷺ made dua for him and asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to support him. And that was how he saved that child. Again, it's how you prepare your community to reach that level also. When you tell them, do you like this to be done to? Because in some communities they may say, if they like it, khalas. It happens. But again, it's idea of foundations and bringing the community to a level when they can abhor these acts. I will close also with another example. when the Prophet ﷺ is defending a sinner. And this man used to be brought for punishment because he's addicted to drinking. And one of the Sahaba said, "Ma akthara ma yu'ta bik." How frequently you are brought here. And they cursed him. And the Prophet ﷺ, there are two narrations. One time the Prophet ﷺ would say, "La takun عونا للشيطان على أخيك." Do not assist the shaitan against your brother. And in another narration, إنه يحب الله ورسوله. He loves Allah and His Prophet. Just looking for anything good this man could have. Right? These are one of the ways of appreciating the life of the Prophet ﷺ is to read that one chapter that many people ignore. And also for us as educators. If you're teaching the seerah, the first chapter should be for what we talked about here. Should be recognizing this is the case. Can you imagine that these problems could be solved? And now, who solved them? Was he prepared for this? No, it was Allah who prepared him. So as Imam al-Razi said, he has a very good small book called Ma'alim Usul al-Din. He said that just the fact that the Prophet ﷺ did not read and write, was not educated by anyone, was born in the desert where no education is there, and all of a sudden he's teaching, this is a sure sign that whatever he received is from Allah. Because there is no preparation, there is no expectations. So, and I would count this, the social miracles of seerah, and the social change brought by the Prophet ﷺ, I would count it as one of his miracles ﷺ. And I'll close with what one of the poets said, أَتَطْلُبُونَ مِنَ الْمُخْتَارِ مُعْجِزَةً يَكْفِيهِ شَعْبًا مِنَ الْأَمْوَاتِ أَحْيَاهُ. Are you demanding a miracle from the Prophet? It is enough for him that he brought life to a dead nation. And also Ahmed Shawqi used something like this and said, أخوك عيسى دعا ميتا فقام له وأنت أحييت أجيالا من الرمم. Your brother Isa brought a dead person back to life, but you brought a dead nation back to life. أسأل الله تعالى أن يرزقنا الهداية وأن يهدينا جميعا. اللهم آمين. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. وجزاكم الله خيرا.